This anime was opened with the gathering of the gods and goddesses who were carrying out an election to save a place with an S-level enemy named Geabrande. If the gods and goddesses could carry out the task, they were entitled to a promotion. A healing goddess named Restart was chosen as the savior of the place. She was assigned to summon a hero from the human world, who had superpowers to help save the city. That was because the place was still in human territory. Restart immediately rushed to look for people with superpowers in some of the papers she had previously chosen. Unfortunately, of all the names she read, no one had the power she wanted. Restart became irritated. But suddenly, a piece of paper fell right in front of her. She was so surprised to see the paper's contents because the strength of the person she read was extraordinary. He had a very low level but with such a high level of strength. Restart Tate said such a person was an infrequent person. She was very optimistic that that person could save Geabrande so easily. Long story short, Restart Tate summoned the person into the divine realm with her magic. That person was named Seiya Ryugen. After she managed to summon that person, she looked shocked. Seiya was handsome and muscular, making him look so cool it even crossed Restart Tate's to make love with him. But behind his perfect appearance, it turned out that Seiya had annoying traits that made Restarte a little annoyed. He didn't even pay attention to Restarte's words, who was a goddess, and thought Restarte was a strange woman. But Restarte tried to be patient with Seiya's annoying nature to fulfill her duties as the chosen goddess. Restarte then told why Seiya was brought to that place, which was to save a place called Geabrande from the evil demon lord. But Restarte was again ignored by Seiya. Restarte ordered Seiya to say the word status so she could see Seiya's skill level. It could be seen that Seiya's strength status showed quite a large number, even though he was only at level 1. This made Restart even more convinced that Seiya could defeat the demon lord in Geabrande. But in fact, her expectations did not match because Seiya refused Restarte's order to defeat the demon lord. Restarte attempted to persuade Seiya, and luckily, the persuasion worked. But Seiya required Restarte to let him train to increase his power level. Restarte agreed to these conditions. Restarte gave Seiya the things he needed while training, such as food, beds, and bathrooms. Restarte also gave him an alarm, where if Seiya had finished practicing he could call her. But unfortunately, during 4 days of practice the alarm never went off. It made Restarte so bored. After a week the alarm finally sounded. Immediately Restarte went to Seiya's place and together they went to Geabrande. Arriving there, they decided to look for combat suits first. There they met a little girl named Nina. Nina told them where the armor was sold. Restarte gave a bag of money to help Seiya meet his needs, namely a battle suit and some herbal medicines. After all of Seiya's items were fulfilled, they then went to carry out their task of hunting down demons. But before that they met Nina again, who encouraged them. Nina gave them a piece of paper with a yellow flower as a talisman. They then went to a clearing and found a slime monster. Restarte pointed out that the slime monster was very weak. She asked Seiya not to fight it. However, Seiya didn't listen to Restarte's words, and immediately attacked it with full strength. He was so ambitious to kill that slime monster, until nothing was left of it. Then after the slime monster was killed, they intended to go to the next monster, but suddenly they were shocked by an evil aura so strong. It turned out the aura belonged to another demonic monster that had just appeared. She was one of the 4 commanders of the demon lord named Chaos Machina. Unlike the previous slime monster, Chaos was a quite strong S-level heavenly demon. In fact, her strength level, which was level 66 at Seiya's level. There was a chase that happened there, but fortunately they both managed to escape and return to their places. After realizing that his enemy was powerful, Seiya ordered Restart to leave so he could continue his training. Seiya advised that he would summon Restart back when he was ready. After waiting 2 days, the call from Seiya never came. This made Restart bored. She then decided to spy on Chaos Machina. Restart was very surprised because she saw Chaos had messed up the village where Nina lived. Chaos threatened that she would kill all the villagers if they didn't arrive within 10 minutes. Restart then immediately met Seiya and informed him of the situation. However, Seiya didn't want to go there quickly because his training was still unfinished. But Seiya told Restart not to worry because the time was different at their place and there, which was 10 minutes there equals 16 hours at their place. But Restart was so worried about the condition of the people there, asked Seiya to rescue them immediately. But Seiya refused to go there because his training wasn't over yet. This made Restarte very disappointed in him. She thought Seiya was a coward. Seiya, who didn't like being called that, then said why he kept training. While preparing, he said that if he were to lose the battle, then the city and the world they lived in would be destroyed by the demon lord. Restarte then checked how much Seiya's power had increased after the training. She was surprised because Seiya's strength level had increased so rapidly in just 2 days of training, namely at level 21. They then rushed to Nina's place to save them. Chaos was surprised when she saw Seiya's increased power level. Not wanting to lose, Chaos also grew her strength, which made her body bigger. Unfortunately, the power was still not able to beat Seiya. In the end, Chaos issued a flagship move called Demonic Curse. She thrust the sword into her own body, and before long her body began to be enveloped in a black shadow that made her turn into a giant bull-like monster. Chaos launched the attack, but miraculously Seiya managed to stop the attack with just one hand. This made Restart so shocked. Out of curiosity, Restart tried to see Seiya's power level again. How surprised she was because Seiya's power level rose to level 37. She just realized that Seiya's previous strength was just a fake. Seiya probably didn't want other monsters to discover his abilities through Restart's mind. With just one strike, Phoenix Drive, Seiya could finally defeat Chaos with great ease. After Chaos was defeated, the villagers flocked to thank the two of them. They were even invited to a party for the killing of Chaos. Unfortunately, Seiya refused the offer because he wanted to clean up the remaining shards of Chaos's body quickly. He did this to prevent Chaos from rising again, but what he did was too much. He went out with all his ability to finish the rest of the body. As a result, the whole city was burned and the villagers who had been happy even expelled them both. They eventually returned to the Divine Realm to continue Seiya's training. Restarts then met a goddess of the seal named Ariadoa, who was also Restart's senior. It wasn't long before Seiya came running up to them. He wondered why his strength level didn't increase even though he practiced a lot. Restart, who wanted to finish her task, immediately advised Seiya to just fight against monsters because who knows, his strength would increase. However, this suggestion was rejected by Seiya because it was too risky. They were confused about what to do. Finally, Arya suggested Seiya train with the gods instead. Besides the fact that the gods could not die, Seiya would also gain more experience. Then they approached the place of a famous stubborn sword god named Cerseus. Cerseus always practiced without feeling tired at all. Arya asked Cerseus to train Seiya. Initially, Cerseus refused the request because he considered a human being unfit to be trained by someone as powerful as himself. But because Arya asked, he finally accepted the request. Cerseus said that the training would be tough and a human like Seiya would be unable to do it. But Seiya paid no heed to those words, asked Cerseus not to talk too much, and immediately started training. On the first day of training, everything looked fine and it was seen that Cerseus could still eat in peace. However, after 4 days of training, Cerseus, who at first could still be calm, now felt very depressed. He told Restart he couldn't eat and rest because Seiya kept asking him to train. When Seiya came to see him, Cerseus was so scared and threw away his holy sword so that Seiya would stop asking him to practice. Restart, who saw that, was very surprised and asked Seiya to stop immediately. But Seiya, obsessed with getting stronger, ignored Restart's words. At the same time, Arya came to tell Restarte that Istar, the most senior goddess, asked her to meet. Immediately, Restarte went to Istar's place. Istar told Restarte to continue her journey to the city of Seimol immediately, because according to her prediction, she believed a new monster would destroy the city. Apart from that, she informed them that their allies were already waiting there. Restart immediately rushed to see Seiya, who was training with Cerseus then. Hastily, Restart said that they had to go to the next place immediately because a danger would arise. Since Seiya was tired of practicing, he agreed to leave immediately. Arriving at Seimol, it turned out that what Istar said was true. They saw the villagers flocking to leave the place. According to information from some of them, the city would be attacked by troops called Undead. The Undead troops was a group of people who had become zombies. According to the story, the only way to beat them was to use fire magic or holy water. They then went to a holy water shop and bought 10 bottles. Then they went to a church to meet their allies, who Istar had previously informed. When they arrived, it turned out that their allies were 2 small children, descendants of the dragon clan named Alulu and Mash. Then they were all shocked when suddenly Seiya spilt a bottle of holy water on the body of a priest who was also present there. They thought that Seiya had lost his mind. It turned out that Seiya's guess was correct, and the priest was one of the undead in disguise. Seiya swiftly cut the zombie's body without having to touch it in the slightest. But unfortunately, the zombie was not dead and could still talk. He informed Seiya that another undead troop created by Death Magla and led by Commander Maga was heading to the city. He said that the number of troops was 10,000 people. Of course, that surprised Restart while Seiya was just being as usual. Then Seiya annihilated the zombie with his firepower to destroy the entire church. With some trepidation, Alulu and Mash tried to get to know Seiya. Even though the strength of the two of them was far below Seiya's, Restart hoped that Seiya would accept them as allies, but unexpectedly, Seiya refused them to become his partners. This annoyed Mash, and they finally left Seiya and Restarte. It wasn't long before the soldiers sent by King Samel came to them. They found a nun who initially fainted, and wanted to tell everything including the 10,000 undead troops about to attack. After learning the 10,000 undead troops were coming, the soldier asked Seiya to defeat them. Seiya was willing to help them as long as they wanted to give Seiya money in return for his services in killing these troops. After agreeing, Seiya immediately rushed off and flew away without waiting for help from Restarte. He felt that he did not need Restarte's help. Annoyed by Seiya's words, Restarte caught up with Seiya with her flying power called the Lista Wing, causing her body to be injured from chasing Seiya, whose speed was breakneck. Arriving where the undead troops were preparing to head to Samel City, Seiya immediately issued his power called Meteor Strike. He called it a mini meteor strike even though the attack was so strong that it could annihilate all 10,000 undead troops that were gathering. Restart was very surprised to see Seiya's strength. Unfortunately, when Seiya wanted to reissue his strike to finish off the remnants of the undead, his body weakened, making his head dizzy and tired. Seeing that, Restart immediately brought Seiya back to Samel to stay at the nearest inn. There she met Alulu, who looked sad because Mash had been missing for 2 days. Meanwhile, Seiya had been rewarded for killing the undead troop. Seiya began experimenting and created a sword called a platinum sword. He made the sword from Restart's fallen hair and then forged it into his sword. Not long after, the innkeeper came and brought a package given by a mysterious person. She said that a hooded man gave her the package. After opening, the package contents turned out to be a beautiful mirror. But the mirror was not an ordinary, but a dimensional mirror made by Death Magla. It showed that Mash was in his captivity. He threatened to kill Mash in revenge for Seiya destroying his troops. Seeing that, Seiya immediately cut off Death Magla's arm even though they were far away. Death Magla was shocked because his arm was severed. He was confused about how Seiya's sword could penetrate his dimensional mirror. It turned out that Seiya's sword was not an ordinary platinum sword, but a sword that could pierce time and space. After that, Seiya and Restart rushed to Istar to find out the whereabouts of Death Magla. After Death Magla's whereabouts were discovered, they immediately rushed there. Seiya immediately attacked Death Magla, while Restart was tasked with saving Mash. On the other hand, Death Magla took out a shadow creature called Dark Virus. This creature had enormous power and was immune to magic. It was said that the way to defeat these creatures was by changing the body's molecules with the power of ice or by freezing them. Seiya, who already knew its weakness, didn't want to waste any more time and immediately attacked it. Even though Seiya didn't have the power of ice, in the end he managed to freeze the creature using his tool. He created the tool using Restart's fallen hair. In addition, he also created other tools such as lightning, electricity, light, darkness, and others. To make sure Dark Virus lost, Seiya then took out his flame sword. After Dark Virus was defeated, Death Magla, who had no more power, was finally killed by Seiya. The scene moved to an inn in Samel City. After Seiya and Restart managed to save Mash, they moved Mash to an inn and asked him to rest. Mash pondered because he was so weak. He desperately wanted to become stronger. Ultimately, he asked Seiya to make him and Alulu his apprentices. Since Seiya needed people to bring his goods, Seiya was willing to accept them as long as they were willing to carry out their duties as porters. After they were accepted as apprentices, Mash told a mysterious place called Dragon Cave, where there was a powerful weapon that could help Seiya defeat the Demon Lord. That place was also the arrival of Alulu and Mash, who was brought by a dragon to be destined to become the hero's partner. Seiya wanted to leave, but before that he first returned to the Divine Realm to train himself. Mash and Alulu, arriving in the Divine Realm, they looked for Cerseus in the tomb. They were surprised to see Cerseus, wearing an apron, busy cooking cakes. Cerseus looked terrified at Seiya's return. While shouting, Cerseus told him he didn't want to practice anymore. But Seiya told him it wasn't him who would be trained, but Mash. Hearing that made Cerseus a little relieved. Especially when he knew that Mash's ability was not that high. He was immediately excited to train Mash. Next, they went to the fire goddess named Hestiaka. Restarte asked Hestiaka to train Alulu, because Alulu and Mash already had partners to practice with. Only Seiya had yet to get a training partner. When they were walking, Restarte accidentally bumped into a woman. The woman was the goddess of destruction named Valkyrie. There was almost an argument between Seiya and Valkyrie because he didn't accept Restarte being harassed by Valkyrie. Luckily, the fight soon ended after Arya asked Valkyrie to leave. Knowing that Seiya was looking for a training partner, Arya brought Seiya to a war goddess named Adanella. Adanella was a war goddess who had a level above Cerseus, but her brain was a bit insane. Arya asked Adanella to train Seiya. Since Adanella liked to teach others, she accepted it. Adanella then demonstrated a technique she would give Seiya. This technique is called the Eternal Sword, where the user would have above average speed. However, it had a risk, namely, if the user's body was not strong enough, then his body might be destroyed. Without thinking much, Seiya immediately accepted it, and asked Adanella to train him immediately. On the first day of practice, everything seemed fine. However, after 2 days of training, Adanella looked different because it turned out that she had a crush on Seiya. The next day, when Seiya was with the others going to Dragon Cave, Adanella approached Seiya with a very different appearance. Adanella, who previously looked disheveled and a bit crazy, turned into a charming girl. She baked a cake for Seiya and asked him to invite her along. But Seiya's answer was shocking, because he refused Adanella's gift and immediately left her. Suddenly Adanella's anger exploded. But no matter how mad Adanella was, Seiya still ignored her and immediately went to the next place. On the way, they met several monsters, but Seiya easily defeated all of them without spending the slightest effort. He could do it because he created a phoenix bird to defeat all monsters under level 30. Restart, who saw this, was quite surprised. She was curious and wanted to see how high Seiya's level was. But what happened instead was that she was attacked by an illusion that hurt her eyes. It turned out that Seiya had created a protective shield so that no one else could see his level and strength. Not long after that, they arrived at Dragon Cave. Unfortunately, the cave was currently closed, and only Alulu and Mash could open it. But before they could even try, Seiya had already opened the door with his newly learned Immortal Sword technique. After successfully opening the door, they were asked to climb a particular footing that had been prepared to go to the dragon village. But because Seiya was so careful, he put down a lizard first. After seeing that the lizard was fine, then he dared to get up and leave. Arriving at Dragon Village, they were confronted by a dragon-headed human named Lagos. He was assigned by a dragon leader named Queen Levi to escort Seiya and the others to meet her. The purpose was to show the power that Mash and Alulu had. It turned out that Mash had the ability to be able to turn into a dragon, which aimed to help the hero. In comparison, Alulu would carry out a more important task than Mash. She would be sacrificed to become a sword named Exation, which would later help Seiya defeat the Demon Lord. Hearing that, they were all shocked. Unfortunately, they couldn't do anything because Alulu was destined to do all that. And also, that sword was one of the ways to defeat the Demon Lord. Alulu looked gloomy after learning the truth, but Seiya didn't seem to care about that. He even went shopping when Alulu was sad and bought a bag of speed seeds where anyone who ate the seed would be faster. The dragon people held a banquet before Alulu was transformed into the Exation sword, and Seiya, Restart, and Mash were seen eating their food with gusto. It wasn't long before Alulu's sacrificial ceremony began. Alulu was asked to jump into an abyss which would turn her into a sword. Alulu was gloomy, but she was forced to accept the situation because she could not do anything. When Alulu was about to be thrown into the abyss, Seiya suddenly showed up there and helped her. He reasoned that he didn't want to lose one of his luggage carriers. This made Restart and Mash dare to fight. But unfortunately, because the food they had eaten before had been poisoned, they all became paralyzed. When Alulu was about to be thrown back into the abyss, Seiya could suddenly fight back. That surprised Queen Levi and the others. It turned out that after eating his food, Seiya secretly vomited his food. He reasoned that the food the lizard made was disgusting. Left with no choice, Queen Levi took on the form of a dragon to force Seiya to surrender Alulu. Fortunately, Seiya, who was fully prepared, had brought a dragon sword, which was the only item that could injure dragons. The sword Seiya created using 100 strands of Restart's hair, which he combined with a platinum sword. Even though the sword could injure Queen Levi, one strike was not enough to defeat her. Queen Levi also used cunning methods. She activated the curse contained in Alulu's necklace that she previously wore. This of course put Alulu's life in danger. Seiya warned Queen Levi to lift the curse immediately, but Queen Levi refused and chose to fight with Seiya. Queen Levi then activated her golden shield to block Seiya's attack. Since the wall was strong, Seiya used the speed seed he bought earlier, combined with his dragon sword and his double eternal sword move. It made Seiya's speed 100x faster. He used that speed to erode Queen Levi's shield bit by bit, but still, the shield could not be destroyed. Luckily, thanks to Seiya's hard work, he finally beat Queen Levius and then knocked her into the abyss. In this way, the cursed necklace that would take Alulu's life could be stopped. Not long from within the abyss, a sword appeared that flew up. Seiya mixed the sword into Alulu's blood so he could turn it into the Exation sword. Even though the sword was just a platinum sword created by Seiya, he did this so that the dragon people would no longer want to sacrifice Alulu. When they were about to get out of the cave, they were intercepted by the same old troops. It turned out that they had come to ask Seiya to defeat the fly demon that attacked their city. Without thinking, Seiya and the others rushed there. When they arrived, they were astonished to see many fly demons attacking. There was also their leader named Beelzebub. Judging by its strength, the monster wasn't strong but had incredible speed. For a while, Seiya and the others decided to go on a reconnaissance. The fly demons were not only fast, but they were huge and agile. In fact, they could easily destroy same old troops. This made the leader of the same old troops, Rosalie Roseguard, angry. After the flies left, Restart and the others approached Rosalie. Rosalie felt relieved and even asked her troops to fight again. But her subordinate Carlo asked him not to do that because their troops were currently exhausted. Then Restarte and the others brought Rosalie to her castle for a counter-attack meeting. While the meeting was in progress, Seiya instead decided to go back to Divine Realm and do some training, because according to him their chances of winning the battle were very few. But Rosalie forced Seiya to stay there, and Seiya still insisted on going home. As he had said, he had observed the abilities of the fly demons, and their chances were slim. Knowing that Seiya was silent when he saw the massacre of his troops, Rosalie suddenly became angry. There was even a debate there, but according to Seiya it happened because Rosalie didn't have a great strategy. Hearing that, Rosalie's anger grew increasingly, and she almost attacked Seiya. However, Seiya attacked Rosalie by slapping her. Seiya did not differentiate between his attacks against women and men. Not wanting to waste time, Seiya and the others then headed home. While in the Divine Realm, Seiya expressed his annoyance towards Rosalie. He said Rosalie annoyed him so much because she still told her troops to attack despite no chance of victory. Seiya finally found a way to defeat the army of flies using arrows. They then immediately went to the place of the arrow goddess named Midas, who had such excellent archery skills. Midas showed her archery prowess, which she called Shining Arrow, where she could multiply arrows into several parts. Seiya wanted to accept the technique that Midas would give, but before that Seiya must master the bow summoning technique first. He asked Alulu to teach him. With just a few steps, Seiya was able to create his own bow. The practice finally started. While Restarte and the others were waiting for Seiya to train, Circeus suddenly approached them with a frightened face. He informed them that Seiya was currently in danger because Adanella was still very angry due to the previous incident. Knowing this, Restarte immediately went to Arya for help. Arya advised Restarte not to worry because Adanella would not kill Seiya. Hearing that, Restarte calmed down a bit. Then the conversation turned to Alulu and Mash, who Arya knew had hidden powers. She immediately helped them to unlock their hidden powers. While everyone was busy, Restarte tried to come to Adanella's place to see if she was okay. But Adanella was not fine. She turned monstrous and a little crazy while continuously asking Restarte the whereabouts of Seiya. Restarte, who didn't want Seiox to get hurt, immediately informed Seiya of what happened, and she told Seiya to leave immediately. But it was too late because suddenly Adanella came before them. Adanella was so angry and almost got into a fight there. Luckily, Seiya managed to deal with that by paying a little attention to Adanella by rubbing her head. Adanella blushed and finally she melted down. But unbeknownst to Seiya, Midas secretly peeps at him from afar. After that, the scene moved to Restarte, who met Arya to see the results of Mash and Alulu's training. Restarte was so surprised because they could bring out their true power after just a short training. Mash could turn all parts of his body into a dragon, and Alulu could slow or speed things up if she touched them. Restarte was feeling delighted. But when Arya found out that Seiya was training with Midas, Arya suddenly got angry. That was because Midas was a dangerous goddess. She was a perverted goddess who constantly preyed on the hero's sexuality. She couldn't imagine what would happen to Seiya if he continued his training with Midas. Hearing that, Restarte immediately rushed to warn Seiya. But it was too late. She saw a half-naked Midas and ran wildly out of control. She was trying to catch Seiya and Mash. Luckily, Seiya could stop her with an arrow right in her chest. Feeling that his training was enough, Seiya returned to Samul to defeat the fly demons. Long story short, they then departed. When they arrived, they were surprised to see Rosalie, who had already left for battle. Seiya felt that it didn't matter since he could use Rosalie as bait. When Seiya was aiming at the leader of the fly demons, Rosalie foolishly screamed, which caused her to be caught. Seiya then told Restarte to follow him. At the same time, he would secretly attack from afar. But again, because of Rosalie's stupidity, who said that Seiya was there, causing Seiya's plan to be read. The leader of the fly demons flew higher, so that Seiya could not carry out his attacks. But suddenly an arrow shot towards him. The leader of the fly demons suspected that Seiya was following him. With disdain, he challenged Seiya to a fight. Without further ado, Seiya immediately used this opportunity to launch his attack. But alas, none of Seiya's attacks hit the fly demon leader. When the leader of the fly demons was excited about winning against Seiya, suddenly the arrow turned around and pierced his stomach. It seemed that Seiya had already prepared for that. He changed his arrow into a phoenix in case the attack was missed. Finally, the leader of the fly demons could be defeated. Seiya then ordered Mash and Ilulu to finish the remaining flies, as Seiya learned they had new powers. But before they could use their powers, Seiya had already killed the flies in a matter of seconds. Not forgetting, he immediately annihilated the bodies of the fly demons with hell's fire just like before. It didn't take long for Rosalie to come to tell him that there was legendary armor in a temple near Izili village. She told him the great sage had prepared the armor to face future crises and defeat the demon lord. Without further ado, they immediately went there. But when they got there, they were all surprised because the place had been destroyed. The Demon Lord's Supreme Commander and summoning magic user Kilkapul, with his pet monster, wrecked the place. And what's more surprising, Kilkapul also destroyed the legendary armor Rosalie told Seiya about. The Demon Lord assigned Kilkapul to kill Seiya. Even to do that, he was willing to sacrifice his family and his life to summon the God of Death to defeat Seiya. They were stunned to see the power of the God of Death because the numbers displayed were irregular. Fights were unavoidable, and attacks began to be launched by Seiya. But the counterattack from Seiya actually made the God of Death multiply. Feeling that there was no chance of victory, Seiya asked Ristarte to open a gate to Divine Realm while he distracted the monster. When the opportunity arose, Seiya immediately threw Ristarte, Mash, and Ilulu to get out of there. Upon arrival, Seiya asked Ristarte to heal the wounds on his body. The wound was insignificant, and only seemed to have been hit by a small bump. Of course, Ristarte, who handled it, was very annoyed. But suddenly the previous God of Death appeared. It turned out that he could penetrate the dimensional space. Ristarte panicked because they didn't know how to beat him. One by one, the gods and goddesses who were there worked together to defeat the God of Death. Seiya used the opportunity to run away quickly. But no matter how many attacks from the gods and goddesses were there, the Death God could defeat them all. Seiya then turned to Adanella, who was passing by for help. Without thinking, Adanella, who was persuaded by Seiya's good looks, immediately attacked the God of Death. At first she thought that her attack was successful, but that only made the death gods multiply. The God of Death easily defeated Adanella. The chase continued. Ristarte, who saw the God of Death getting closer, panicked. But Seiya said she didn't need to worry because he already had a plan. He kept running towards the Valkyrie room, which was painting at that time. The plan was to make the God of Death attack Valkyrie to make her angry, and it worked. Valkyrie immediately let out her destructive attack, but because the God of Death was immortal, the Valkyrie's lethal attacks had no effect. Valkyrie was forced to use all her strength, which increased her strength 1,000 times and almost reached the maximum level. Even the Death God's attack could be easily parried by Valkyrie. In the end, Valkyrie issued her forbidden move, Valhalla Gate. The power would imprison the person who was hit by it in a world of nothingness. Finally, the God of Death could be defeated. As a result of that move, Valkyrie became limp and her body was bleeding profusely. Apparently, it was the effect of using the forbidden Valhalla Gate technique, which would take the user's body as a reward. But because Valkyrie could not die, she only felt ordinary pain. Seiya realized that Valkyrie was the only strongest goddess there. He immediately asked Valkyrie to train him because according to him, Valkyrie was the only goddess who could match his strength. Seiya asked Valkyrie to teach him the forbidden move of the Valhalla Gate. At first, Valkyrie refused because she thought humans couldn't master the technique, but because Seiya still insisted on learning the move, Valkyrie was forced to teach him. Seiya then told Ristarte about the adamantitor sword he created using pieces of legendary armor that had previously been destroyed. He claimed that the sword could not be destroyed and was the strongest sword he currently had. But he wasn't sure if the sword could defeat the Demon Lord's attacks. When Seiya was undergoing his training, Ristarte was summoned by Istar to meet her immediately. Istar told Ristarte they didn't have much time and must immediately leave for Giabrande, because the Demon Lord's last troops surrounded the place. Ristarte immediately went to Valkyrie's place to tell Seiya about the situation. Since Seiya had finished his training, they immediately set off. But without Ristarte noticing, Seiya didn't mention that he was 100% ready on this trip as usual. That made Ristarte a little worried. Arriving at the capital city of Giabrande, it turned out that all the troops had gathered to fight. One of the last commanders, Eraser Kaiser, led the demon troops, whose strength was high enough to defeat Giabrande's troops. When Seiya stepped forward to confront the leader, suddenly, an old man in armor and a sword appeared. At first he thought the old man was trivial because he looked like an ordinary old man. But suddenly everyone was shocked when he showed his ability to defeat Eraser Kaiser in an instant. Even he could defeat all the remaining demon troops in just one swing of the sword. Upon inspection, it turned out that the old man had quite a high level of strength, much higher than Eraser Kaiser. Also, he was Rosalie's father, Volker's Roseguard, better known as War Master. Restart asked him if he was that strong and why he seldom engaged in battle. When Volkers wanted to answer, suddenly, he turned into a baby. Restart and the others were utterly shocked. It turned out to be the reason why he seldom engaged in battle. They didn't know what caused it, but according to Rosalie, her father had a curse. She immediately took her father away back to the castle. Rosalie asked Seiya and the others to meet her at the castle in 2 hours. While waiting for the meeting time, Seiya and the others went to a market to look for items to help him defeat the demon lord. Seiya found a herbal shop that claimed that its medicinal abilities were 3x stronger than magic. Ristardo, who heard this, was very angry because she felt humiliated. She then challenged the seller to find out who was the best. Ristardo immediately put out all her abilities, but unfortunately, Ristardo lost. This made Ristardo even more annoyed and angry. After that, they met Rosalie at the castle as previously agreed. Rosalie told them how much she loved her father. Rosalie's goal in inviting Seiya to the castle was not to let her father go to fight against the demon lord. Of course, Seiya accepted the request because from the start, he didn't want Rosalie's father to come along. The next day, Volkas summoned Seiya and the others to discuss their journey of defeating the demon lord. Seiya immediately said that Volkas couldn't come along. He just smiled and felt as if indeed he was old. It wasn't long before there were reports that the remaining demon troops were coming back and attacking the capital. Seiya immediately volunteered to eradicate them. While Seiya was fighting, Volkas invited Restart into a room and told her he used to be a hero like Seiya. He also explained the reason why gods and goddesses could not die, and that was because their souls were all still sealed in the divine realm. That meant if they died in the human world they would only return to the divine realm, and the same happened for the hero. But he said that there was an object that could prevent gods and goddesses from returning to life. That object was a sword made by the demon lord named God Eater, where the sword could destroy a person's true soul, be it a god and goddess or a hero. Holding the sword, he mentioned Volglex threatened to kill Restart and Seiya. He said that he had already sided with the demon lord. He was annoyed at the gods and goddesses who had called him to be a hero when he was old, even though being a hero had been his dream since childhood. Then the attack was launched by Volglex. Unfortunately, Restart was caught quickly. Restart had resigned herself to dying, but Seiya came just in time to help her. Volglex wondered how Seiya knew if he would kill Restart. Seiya replied that he was just using his feelings. Volglex laughed and was amazed by Seiya's careful nature. He challenged Seiya to a fight, but because his body was old, he suddenly vomited blood. But that wasn't a problem for him because the demon lord had given him a demon orb, which could make him young again. Instantly, Volglex's power multiplied. He was able to avoid Seiya's barrage of attacks and even injured Seiya quite severely. This was Seiya's first time facing a powerful foe. Seiya then took off all the weight he was wearing, including the armor on his arms, which was quite heavy. Then an epic battle ensued. Volglex and Seiya slashed swords at each other fast enough that Restart's eyes couldn't follow their movements. Ilulu had even upgraded Seiya's power to maximum speed, but still it could be parried by Volks, who had become a half-demon at that time. The fight continued until both of them lost one of their arms. Seiya instantly used the opportunity to attack Volks. Volks could not dodge the attack, and that cost him the fight. Seiya asked Risalta to heal them both. In the seconds Volks was about to die, Seiya asked Risalta to speak to him, but Risali was already angry and disappointed with her father and refused to talk. Seiya instantly slapped Risali and said a sentence that made Risali sober. Seiya said that if her father died, no matter how loudly Risali screamed, he would not be able to hear. For that, while his father is still alive, talk to him. Risali immediately burst into tears in front of her father. Volk spoke for a while and stroked Risali's head before finally dying. Seiya was then taken to Risali's residence to rest, while Volks, who died, was immediately buried, and his position as king was replaced by Risali. A few moments later, Seiya awoke from his rest. Seiya wanted to relax for a few days before finally meeting the demon lord. Restart was surprised and happy because Seiya didn't usually like to relax. Since Seiya's decision was unanimous, without thinking much, they all immediately went to the market to relax their minds and bodies and buy some things, starting from clothing, food, and other goods. They went to a casino to play slots and also visited a hot spring. After all was done, in the afternoon they went home. But they were surprised because Seiya was not in his room even though they had promised to meet in the afternoon. After a long wait, Seiya didn't come either. Restart became worried and intended to look for him in the market while asking several merchants hoping they could help. But sadly none of them knew. This made Restart panic even more. Moreover, Alulu said that Seiya could fight the demon lord alone. Not long after they met Arya, who was crying and said goddess Ishtar wanted to meet them. They were then taken to a strange place, where the place was not bound by time. It turned out to be a place where the souls of gods and goddesses were sealed. Ishtar said that Seiya had already gone to the demon lord's palace alone. He did that to save his friends because he already knew that if he lost there all his friends would definitely be killed. Restart couldn't believe hearing that because she knew Seiya had never worried about her and the others. Ishtar said even though Seiya's words were often harsh and his personality was irreverent, Seiya was a kind person and cared deeply about the safety of his friends. In fact, he was willing to do anything to keep all his friends safe. Restart, who still couldn't believe it, said why Seiya didn't train first before fighting the demon lord like he used to. Ishtar said that unfortunately, he couldn't do that anymore because Seiya's power level had reached the maximum level. It had been happening for some time when they were in Dragon Village. In order for his strength to grow again, Seiya forced himself to learn special skills from goddesses and gods, such as shining arrows and Valhalla gates, which were actually skills that were fatal to his life. Hearing this, Restart's feelings were mixed between worry and sadness. But how else Seiya did all that to save his friends, as well as to pay for his mistakes in the past? Ishtar said that Seiya used to be a hero. He went with his partner Colt, goddess Arya, and also Princess Tiana, who was assigned to kill the level B demon lord in Ixphoria. At that time, Seiya's character was completely different from now. He really hated training and was more concerned with his faith. However, thanks to his fighting talent that had been inherent since childhood, he managed to defeat all his opponents whose levels were far above his. But he often made his friends hurt, until the day they would fight against the demon lord. Initially, the fight went pretty well. Seiya managed to defeat the demon lord even though the fight almost killed Colt and Princess Tiana. But somehow, suddenly, the demon lord came back to life. One by one, his friends Colt and Arya were eaten by the demon lord. It turned out that Seiya had ignored an important message previously conveyed by goddess Arya before the fight. They should go to a place to ask a hermit to find out the power of the demon lord. Unfortunately, Seiya, who was so lazy, ignored the message instead. Ultimately, it was all fatal, and the demon lord killed all his friends. Even sadder was that Princess Tiana was pregnant with Seiya's child. Since that incident, Seiya realized he had to get stronger and prepare everything he needed to fight his enemies more maturely. Then a memory that was in Restart's mind appeared vaguely. Apparently, Restart had met Seiya before, but not in her current form, but she was the reincarnation of Princess Tiana, Seiya's partner and lover. Knowing this, Restart cried loudly. She wanted to save Seiya. Despite being banned, she forced herself to go to the demon lord's palace, followed by Mash and Alulu. Arriving there, it turned out that what Ishtar said was true. Seiya was fighting the demon lord and was about to unleash his destructive technique. The newly arrived Restart told him to stop. Unfortunately, she was too late. Seiya, who was determined to die, immediately took out the Valhalla gate. Initially, he thought the demon lord would be powerless against the Valhalla gate. However, the demon lord could almost escape because he still had great strength. Luckily, Seiya, who had predicted this would happen, used his eternal sword technique and forced the demon lord back into the prison of Valhalla gate. At first, the demon lord underestimated the attack from Seiya because he thought that Seiya's sword would not be able to stab him. But unexpectedly, slowly, Seiya's attacks could injure him. The demon lord was surprised because how Seiya's sword could hurt his body. Moreover, Seiya's sword wasn't Ixayun's sword. It turned out that it was because Seiya's sword had been fused together with a fragment of the legendary armor that made it indestructible. Just as the demon lord was cornered, Seiya unleashed his final Valhalla slash to push the demon lord inside. Luckily this time he succeeded. However, due to the effects of using the Valhalla gate, suddenly Seiya's body was bleeding profusely. This indicated that soon Seiya would die because he was only a human. Restart, who saw his condition, felt very sad. But because she didn't want to lose Seiya, she used all of her goddess's power to bring Seiya back to life, even if it meant sacrificing her status as a goddess to be revoked. At first she thought it was impossible, but fortunately, Restart Seiya's life. It was a shame the problem still hadn't been solved because the demon lord hadn't died yet. With the last of his strength, the demon lord created a hole to suck up all the space in Gaeabrande. Restarty didn't expect an S-class demon's power to be that big. When Restarty gave up, Seiya released his destructive power for the second time. The demon lord's body managed to suck into the hole because now the pulling power of the Valhalla gate had become much stronger. In the end, the demon lord was defeated and dead. But Seiya, who used the Valhalla Gate for the second time, must accept the risk, which was certain he would die. Slowly, his body began to crack. Restart, who saw that, tried to heal him with all her might. But this time, her efforts were in vain. They could only wait for Seiya's body could last, because if Restart released her healing powers, Seiya's body would be destroyed. In the seconds of his death, Seiya took the time to thank Elulu and Mash for bringing his things. He hugged Restart and thanked Restart because she had tried to save him all this time. Suddenly, Seiya's past memories surfaced. Seiya just realized that Restart was Princess Tiana, who was killed due to his negligence. Seiya was grateful because this time he managed to make up for his past mistakes by not letting Princess Tiana die a second time. Moments later, Seiya's body disintegrated. After the Demon Lord was defeated and the world became more peaceful, the leadership of Gia Brande was entirely held by Rosalie. She also made Mash and Elulu her warriors. Meanwhile, Restart, who had finished carrying out her duties, was forced to return to the Divine Realm. She advised Elulu and Mash to protect this world with all their might. After that, Restart returned to the Divine Realm. When she got there, all of a sudden, all her memories of being with Seiya returned. That saddened her because she remembered the good old days when Seiya was still around. But the problem for Restart was not over yet. She had to accept the punishment from the Holy Court for breaking the agreement. Restart then went to Ishtar's place together with Arya. Ishtar said that Restart would receive punishment to save an SS-level world called Exphoria. It was there where her healing powers were sealed. If Restart failed to perform her duties, her status as a goddess would be suspended for good. Arya, who knew SS-level Exphoria was terrible, asked Ishtar to consider her punishment because according to Restart's current situation, it was impossible for her to finish the task. However, because the decision from the court could not be contested, Ishtar still required Restart to serve the sentence. There was one advantage that Ishtar gave to Restart. Restart could choose one hero she would revive from the list of heroes provided by Ishtar. Unexpectedly on the list, Seiya's name was listed. She was both surprised and excited because it was likely that Seiya would come back to life and she could meet him again. This is the end of Shincho Yusha. Thank you to keep watching the content from this channel. Remember to like and subscribe to keep you updated with our latest content. See you in the next video.